off a daily fantasy. His numbers too high, then I'm probably fading him. He been on the road, he gon' eat up my salary. I hit up by, he gon' lie before lock. Play back to back, then I probably won't pick on the DFS bachelor, good as it gets. Bit a few liners and hit me a leg. He had a good game, but that might be a trick. Log in the Slack so I know who to pick. Sharing our liners, we all gon' get rich. New to this game, you should come to the pad. You might want some cash and get a good laugh. DFS Sports, we gon' run up a bag. He heard every game and it's making me mad. You buying your lineups, I think you a cheater. DFS bachelor, he the new leader. Yeah.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Bachelor Pad. I, of course, am your host, the DFS Bachelor, and it's our final look. And how about this? We're a day early this week with our final look at Week 7 of this weekend's Draftkings and Fanduel main slate. And as usual, we need to double our knowledge in here, and boy, has it paid off for us in the past few weeks. Not just taking my takes, but Donnie's had some great value plays. So we've got our guy, Donnie Seymour, right side VP. How you doing this morning, man?
Doing good. Nice early on a Friday, getting that knowledge out to the people. Kyle, you're burning the candle at both ends here, and I got to say, I like it, man.
Man, we love having you on the show. Everyone loves having you on the show. It's been great. Football's been good to us this year. That's just the bottom line, and so I'm really excited for it. And here on DraftKings, we get all 12 games on Sunday, it appears, on the main slate. With the schedule changes, they dropped the Bucs to the afternoon, obviously. Seahawks Cardinals Sunday night, and it appears, as we're recording right now, that all the games are on the slate. Now, if that changes, I'll have that out on Twitter and stuff, but it appears right now that they're just going to have all 12 games. So I think that's pretty cool because I'm happy to have that Seattle, Arizona, and the Tampa Bay Vegas game on the slate. I think that opens up some nice play, so I'm excited for that. First things first, as usual, don't forget a big thank you to all of you for all your support, your kind words, making us a part of your day. Truly appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Like the video, leave a comment. You could win $50. I'm going to announce the winner right now because I forgot last week till the end of the video. So our $50 PayPal winner, brought to you by our friends at Tax Relief Advocates, is Awesome713. So Awesome713, make sure you hit me up on Twitter, hit me up in the comment section. Let me know how to get that to you, and congratulations to you. Remember, Tax Relief Advocates, making your tax debt disappear faster than the Giants' lead disappeared last night. A heck of a win for those Philadelphia Eagles. You can give them a call at 1-800-411. That's right, 9633. What hell of a game. And I think a couple of guys called that to the T. Close win for the Eagles at the end. I believe that's what we said over there at Sports Book Review. And don't forget, you can catch us 4 times a week, including this Sunday morning, 1 hour live right before kickoff. Donnie and I over at Sportsbook Review, getting you set up with all of our picks, props, predictions, etc. You can find a link to the channel in the video description below. As usual, my player pools, cheat sheets, articles. I even wrote a top stacks article. They talked me into writing an article this week. We even did that. Wide receiver, cornerback rankings, weekly rankings for you season-long players. All that's here on Draft Dashboard. You can try that 30 days for $1, and you get my player pool when you do that. That link is down below. And if you want winners, baseball, football, college basketball, I mean, all that stuff, you go over to rightwager.com. It's just team total winners, day after day after day. Go check Donnie out over there at rightwager.com. Just kicking ass over there. Your record's something crazy this year, right? What is it over there this year?
Yeah, 76%. It's working out well, man. Hitting it, getting after it, having some fun. And again, if you like to root for points, which most of us do, we got team totals, man. We hit the overs, you know. Nobody likes to cheer for the unders, but look, there is some money to be made on the unders, but I just have an eye for the overs, and it's been working out very well. Having a lot of fun here, Kyle.
Yeah, rightwager.com. Be sure to check that out. And don't forget my friends at overlaydfs.com. They're doing a special giveaway right now. If you screenshot your 3-pick parlay at overlaydfs on Twitter, you can win a free subscription into my Slack chat as well. So that's it with the house cleaning. Hey, only 4 minutes, not too bad. So I've been rambling on here. When we look at the slate, we look at quarterbacks here, above that 6,000 range. What are you looking at early this week, or late this week, I should say?
Yeah, it's interesting because, just going over that an extra day ahead of time that we like to look at, it was very nice that, because I do most of my stuff on DraftKings here, that you get the extra team in the slate. And we're not talking about like they're adding in like the Jets and, some other team that really isn't going to factor in. You're talking about 2 high-powered offenses that can really get after it. So us DFS guys, if you throw another 2 good football teams in there, that's wonderful, because then that means there's more value across the slate. Russell Wilson, I obviously, 8,000. So when you pay 8,000, you pay it for the quarterback. You talk about it all the time, Kyle. You're really going to have him dominate. But look, you're going to get a high-tempo game out of Arizona. Both of these teams should score points. So when you take a look at Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, you probably get the more passing yards, one would think, out of Seattle and Russell Wilson. But you also get that extreme rushing yard advantage with Arizona. So when you take a look at Kyler Murray, 7,100 compared to 8,000 to Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray's not a bad option there. But you do have to look at DeAndre Hopkins on the outside. If that ankle, again, is bulky, which it looks like it is this week, it's a slight downgrade. Because when we take a look at last Monday night's football game, Arizona looked great, put up a lot of points, but you only had 9 completions in that game from your quarterback, but he did run wild and obviously put up a touchdown, and that's what you bank on. Josh Allen, I don't think the number can be high enough. 7,700, which, in the past couple of years would be outrageous to play for a Buffalo Bills quarterback, but going up against the Jets, what is his – we always like to talk about ceilings and floors. His ceiling is extremely high, and his floor is extremely low, because when you take a look at that floor option, 250, 2 touchdowns, maybe another rushing touchdown, another 40 to 50 yards on the ground. That looks like he can certainly do that. The one guy I think that's going to be highly owned, Kyle, that everybody's going to want to talk about at the top of the stack, over 7,000, that's Aaron Rodgers going up against one of the worst defenses in football with Houston. The best part about Houston is not necessarily that their defense stinks, is that their offense has come alive. So what does that mean for Aaron Rodgers? You have to keep scoring on each and every possession. You're not going to hold that Houston offense down to 10 or 13 points and run the clock out. You have to keep getting on, and just below him at 6,800 is also Deshaun Watson. Just by default in that game, he also will have to keep up with the offense for the Green Bay Packers. Sliding it down, Matt Ryan going up against that Detroit defense, that's always going to be interesting. But again, you try to manage that by saying, is Julio Jones going to play? If he's good to go, they should be able to put up some points, and vice versa with Matthew Stafford as well, going up against that Atlanta defense. Low end of those options, Ryan Tannehill, 6,200, has had a great year. Maybe want to throttle down going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Also, A.J. Brown banged up this week, not practicing. That would be a big loss if he doesn't go. Andy Dalton against Washington, not really on my radar. And Drew Brees going up against Carolina, who's done fairly well against the pass, not much on my radar as well. But there are a couple high-priced guys that you really think can get after. The one thing I do caution up at the top end, we always like to go Patrick Mahomes, but check the weather reports out of Denver. Snow during the day, 18 degrees. Do they really have to score a ton to beat that Denver Broncos offense? I'm not paying $7,400 for Patrick Mahomes this week here, Kyle.
I absolutely agree, and I'm glad you brought up Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen quite a bit. The one concern is, will the New York Jets participate in this game and force him to do things, Now, his last couple of games against the Jets, a 33 and a 20. The Jets obviously not very good on the perimeter. Austin and Desir, et cetera, Lamar Jackson, they're very bad back there defensively. He certainly has the upside. You just hope that Sam Darnold finds a way to play in this game, and maybe they can sort of make it competitive at home. But I do like Josh Allen. Russell Wilson, it's interesting. He hasn't played great against Arizona. Only 25 combined DraftKings points in 2 games last year against the Cardinals. They've actually been pretty good on the perimeter. You can probably expect Patrick Peterson to be out there on DK Metcalf. So the real matchup you're looking at is Tyler Lockett in the slot against Byron Murphy, who struggles a little bit in the slot. I love Kyler Murray. Seahawks allow the second most fantasy points in the league to opposing quarterbacks. You mentioned it, 9 completions, still put up 29 DraftKings points on Monday Night Football. That rushing upside is there. The DeAndre Hopkins point is a good point. Again, you can follow us on Twitter. When those things come out, we have that information out there on Twitter. Then we get to it. Aaron Rodgers, I think he bounces back in a big way. I think he's pissed off this week. So I do really like that play, and I think you're right. Watson and Rodgers are going to be pretty popular. Have them projected at about 10 and 8%, which in 12 games is actually kind of high. Matt Ryan against the Lions and Matthew Stafford against the Falcons. Love both of those matchups in a dome. The Falcons allow the most fantasy points in the league to opposing quarterbacks. We haven't seen that huge game from Stafford yet. You hope that he'll throw the touchdown passes and DeAndre Swift won't start poaching them in the red zone like he did last week. And then I think that's really it for me over 6K. A little bit of interest, I suppose, in the rookie Justin Herbert against Jacksonville. At home, he's got a nice rushing upside as well. When you look at his last 4 games, nothing less than a 20, a 26, a 24, and a 27 against a porous Jacksonville defense. So I could get down with a little bit of Justin Herbert at 6,400 on DraftKings as well. I think Andy Dalton's way too highly priced. I don't know why in the hell he's 6K. Now, I might have just jinxed that into maybe the career game, the game of his life for Andy Dalton. But above 6K, that's what I am looking at. Below 6K, you got any cheap guys down here that you're looking at this week?
Yeah, we're really scraping the bottom. I mean, when you're trying to
Yeah.
get under the 6,000 level, Gardner Minshew coming from behind, I guess, to play against the Chargers, he's going to put up some junk numbers, but also getting Ingram back at the defensive end. He's going to be under siege in that game. And also, they're talking, obviously, playing on the road. Teddy Bridgewater going up against a decent New Orleans defense. 5,800 doesn't seem all that expensive. The one really interesting one, going against a really poor defense, and it shows you maybe the level that we anticipate getting out of Baker Mayfield since he's banged up and some of his wide receivers are banged up. $5,600 going up against, to me, one of these, if not the worst, one of the single worst bottom 5 defenses in the NFL versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So Baker Mayfield is an interesting one there. And then vice versa, Joe Burrow, if he does not have Joe Mixon, what does that mean, Kyle? We're throwing the ball 45 times, 50 times, maybe 50 plus times in this game. So just by volume, you should be able to rack up some yards. And certainly if you anticipate the Cleveland Browns winning that football game, Joe Burrow, just like he did in the first game versus Cleveland, down double digits, gets that late touchdown, able to punch that in. Derek Carr, not a great week for him, because even to say, hey, look at this Raiders offense, 5,400, I'll take it. They might be without 2, 3, 4, or even all 5 offensive linemen unless they get cleared Sunday morning, going against that heavy pass rush and a very good defense from Tampa Bay. So I'm out on that. Jimmy Garoppolo, you look at 5,300. Usually that'd be a really good spot, but just the tempo of this football game against New England, and New England does have a solid defense. Obviously, Bill Belichick, one of the best guys at scheming to stop what you do best. So maybe focusing in on George Kittle and saying, hey, there's not much explosiveness on the outside. I'm not trusting him in this game. Kyle Allen is an interesting pick because we're trying to get a threshold of, we know Dallas, Kyle, is really bad on defense.
Yeah.
But just because you have a bad defense, you still need an offense that can operate and push the tempo, score points, and really push the ball downfield. Terry McLaurin's a decent wide receiver, but outside of that, where are the points getting stacked up from this kid? Also, Drew Lock, you say, hey, going up against Kansas City, what a cheap number here. He might be able to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns just in comeback mode. Again, talking about why I'm not taking Patrick Mahomes is because of the issues with the weather. Cold weather, if we have snow during the game, 2 to 3 inches, that's going to slow it down, force teams on the ground. The one thing that we do know now is that the Kansas City Chiefs don't have to be all about the passing game. You saw it on Monday Night Football versus the Bills. Hey, we're happy to run the football. We're happy to run clock, and we'll take a game where we win with 24, 26 points and don't really push the issue to go on the backside. One of the guys, go deep, deep down this rabbit hole. If you're looking at Sam Darnold at $5,000, if he does start this week and has all his complement of wide receivers, the Buffalo Bills should put up points. Maybe he can chase because the Jets are a decent offense when he's in. But really, if you're checking Sam Darnold to try to get a winning ticket here, is good luck with that. But you are really scraping the bottom with some of these guys here, Kyle.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would just pay the $200 more for Kyle Allen. I've played Kyle Allen. I mean, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it. The Bills, they've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. That defense has not been the same this year. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But then you talk about the Dallas Cowboys defense, which, is down there with those Bengals and Jacksonville for, worst defense in the NFL. Kyle Allen, I've played him last year, 30-plus fantasy points with Carolina. You're right, limited weapons. He's throwing the ball to J.D. McKissick and Logan Thomas and, Terry McLaurin. But Dallas can't stop anybody. So, I'll probably take a swipe at Kyle Allen in a couple lineups. And if he goes off for 20 or more points, he's really hit value there. I like the Joe Burrow play. Earlier this year in Week 2 on that Thursday night game, Joe Burrow had his best fantasy game of the year, put up 29 points. Now it does look like Cleveland's secondary is getting a little more healthy as the year goes on, and of course it's going to be tough against that pass rush. They are at home. If Cleveland gets out into a lead like we expect them to do, I think Joe Burrow is interesting at 5,500, and I do like Teddy Bridgewater. Even though the Saints defense, Marshawn Lattimore, Janoris Jenkins should be back this week, Saints still allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks, sitting there at 5,800 in that dome, former team from last year. I don't think there's any ill will there. They were actually pretty good to Teddy Bridgewater and let him take the reins over and sort of showcased him so he could sign that big deal with Carolina. They were so this isn't, I would say, a revenge spot. I think there's probably a lot of good feelings there, but I still do like Teddy Bridgewater and that Carolina offense in the dome. We start getting to these colder months. I like players in the dome. I don't have to worry about any wind or rain or snow, any of that crap. Just nice and warm, fast turf. So I do like him quite a bit as well. That's really it for me at quarterback. When we go over to the running back spot, sitting here above 6,000, now we've got some added players in here this week. What do you like above 6K at running back this week?
Yeah, looking above, I mean, you're going to get the pay up guys for the Alvin Kamaras. And Alvin Kamara, to me, Kyle, does get a bump. Anytime you're talking about Michael Thomas missing a football game, that's 10 targets that are going to have to be dispersed to somebody else. And we've seen Alvin Kamara certainly dominate. It's always nice to also get Alvin Kamara on turf, but also Alvin Kamara on a heavy rest. So maybe we can get 20 touches, talking about maybe 13 rushes, maybe 7 catches out of the backfield. We've seen it before. I think he's certainly a pay up option with, again, that very low floor. And also when you very high floor there, speaking that he's probably not going to get shut down in this game. We take a look at Ezekiel Elliott again. This is an interesting one because Zeke Elliott, Kyle, we've talked about all the time, like what does he give you as that bottom basement price? 65 yards and a touchdown seems like automatic every week. The problem I'm having here is now if we don't get Zach Martin back, who hasn't practiced yet this week, but is progressing with concussion, you're talking about an offensive line basically down all 5 starters of what they anticipated coming into the season, and that's a direct reflection of how that's going to play on the running game. You can be the best running back in the world, but if the guys are playing from the defensive line in your backfield repeatedly, you're not going to get very many options, but also that can be a little bit of an upgrade when you're talking about the passing game. If you can't block anybody, it's quick dump offs to the back or obviously over the middle to the tight end position. It's always interesting to see Zeke Elliott 7,800, and I usually would like to and say, hey, he's going to definitely score a touchdown. Do I still think he scores? I do, but it's not one of those weeks where I'm looking to actually take him and spend all that money. The same thing with Derrick Henry. It seems it doesn't matter who he plays. He's going over 100 yards because his usage rate is high, but now he's going up against the Steelers in this game where maybe you don't get all of that rushing room that you got in the past couple weeks, specifically last week. Did whatever he wanted to do, whether it's the passing game or the running game against those Houston Texans, sliding it down. I think Aaron Jones does have a big week this week. I think the points and just the usage rate that you're going to have, let's just say if we're banking on maybe from a gambling perspective, this game going into the mid-50s, that means they're going to be hovering around that 30-point mark. Aaron Jones is going to be certainly involved in all that. Kareem Hunt, I think is a great play at 6,800. If he can just stay healthy for this game, a banged-up Baker Mayfield, banged-up wide receivers, and giving up over 5 yards per carry per game in that Cincinnati defense, and I do think Cincinnati will be losing that game, so therefore you might get those extra 5 carries in the fourth quarter that you wouldn't get if your football team was losing. James Conner going up against Tennessee, who hasn't been very good. Just again, by volume, you'll probably get a good start, 6,700 for him. Mike Davis going against Carolina. We've seen how effective he is in the passing game. No Christian McCaffrey back yet. 6,600 in a game. You're probably going to have to score points to keep up with New Orleans. That's not a bad play as well. Chris Carson, it's for me, it's always tough to go with Seattle because it's such a boomer bust spot. There's so many running backs they use. Russell Wilson takes a good chunk of that away. But his floor is going to be decent at 6,400 in a game that we anticipate getting some points. And Josh Jacobs, again, going with Derek Carr and any wide receivers we're going to talk about, they're completely off my board. If your offensive line is in shambles going against Tampa Bay, there's not going to be very many room. But in that same game, on the opposite side of the field, Ronald Jones II's been fantastic. You can gash the Raiders. And if you anticipate Tampa Bay winning this game, which they're favored to do, he's been wonderful. He seems like he says, hey, you know what? In my career, I've always had the talent, but now also producing over 100-yard games, it seems, left and right now. Low end, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is an interesting one because you saw last week of how well he did in some weather conditions in Buffalo. But now you have to factor in that veteran coming to town, Le'Veon Bell, and what that actually means because Bell is not coming to the Chiefs to sit out and play a couple plays a game. He will immediately throw off that locker room. He's coming to play. Andy Reid knows he's coming to play, and he's talented. It's going to be interesting to see how Clyde Edwards-Helaire reacts to this in a weather game. You would have figured if Le'Veon Bell wasn't there, he's getting 20 touches. I don't know if that's the case, so I'm not going to spend, even though it's only 6,100, I'm not spending that on him.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And if you look so far through the first 6 weeks, the Denver Broncos #1 in the league against opposing running backs in terms of fantasy points allowed, which is kind of surprising. I don't know if that's just a case of their secondary so beat up and teams can throw on them, but that defense I think is overachieving a little bit, so I think that is a tough spot. Looking up, I do love Alvin Kamara this week against Carolina. Carolina's been good against the pass, but against opposing running backs, we're going to get these short passes from Kamara without Michael Thomas, allowing the 5th most fantasy points in the league to opposing running backs right now. And so anytime Michael Thomas is out, you can chalk up Alvin Kamara for 10 targets, probably 6 or 7 catches, breaks one of those screen plays. He's gone. I mean, he hasn't scored anything less than 20 the entire season, and we've seen the legit 50-point upside. Just 3 weeks ago, put up 48 DraftKings points. I mean, that is absolutely insane. And think about that game. It was 14 targets and only 6 carries. He only ran the ball 6 times and put up 48. DraftKings points. Zeke Elliott, I think you made a great point on. I am encouraged by how much he was involved in the passing game with Andy Dalton. He had 11 targets in that game, had a couple of fumbles. I do think you see a motivated Zeke after what happened on Monday. He's probably a little bit embarrassed by what happened in that game, so I don't mind that. But then you're right, you can just pay down here and get some better value. Aaron Jones against Houston, the worst team in the league right now against opposing running backs. I think Aaron Jones has a monster game at 7,200. I think that's a great play. Kareem Hunt, I know he's a little banged up, but he should play. He's a limited participant in practice, has been the last couple of weeks. If you look at that Week 2 game against Cincinnati, he was still splitting time with Nick Chubb and put up 24 DraftKings points. Now you're the bell cow lone carrier in that backfield. I know they throw in some Dearness Johnson once in a while. Bengals 22nd against opposing running backs. I like that play quite a bit. You mentioned Ronald Jones. I am a little worried that Leonard Fournette's going to be back this week. We've sort of seen Leonard Fournette poach some of the ground game. What was it, 3 weeks ago, where Fournette was the guy and scored a couple of touchdowns. Now, how much Ronald Jones has been terrific. The Raiders, one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL, allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs this year. So I do like Ronald Jones. I'm nervous that Fournette is going to take all my glory. I'm going to be watching Red Zone, and it's going to be Leonard Fournette for the touchdown, and I'm going to be pissed. But I'm certainly going to have exposure there. And then right here at this 6,000 mark, I do like Todd Gurley against Detroit. The Lions 29th in the league against opposing running backs. Now, this is not the same Todd Gurley. He's not playing a ton of snaps. They're bringing in Brian Hill. They're bringing in Ito Smith. But if we have a banged-up Julio Jones again, still being targeted 9 times the last couple of weeks, still carrying the ball 15 to 20 times, can get in the end zone once or twice in a game where we expect points to be scored. I think Todd Gurley at 6K against Detroit is a decent play there at the top as well. When we go under 6,000 here, there's not a ton of running backs to love. What are you looking at this week?
Yeah, you're trying to get some explosive plays under 6,000. One of those where you say, you know what, I spent up for my top wide receiver, I spent up for my top running back, and now you're trying to fill in those middling levels there. Singletary for Buffalo, I think, is a decent option because, again, I don't really think there's a lot of resistance from the New York Jets trading their nose tackle, Steve McClendon, already, and also moving a backup linebacker. They're really waving that white flag, it looks like, on defense. The offense going to try to do some things depending on who they get back, but I don't think you're going to get much resistance. And I do always like Devin Singletary playing on turf, which he will be over at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. When we're sliding it down, Melvin Gordon III, who knows if he's going to come back, but also splitting time with Lindsey. I'm not even going to pay that $5,500. It'd be tough weather conditions, so obviously we know that box will be stacked. And already, when you take a running back, you want chances in the red zone to score. Last week, as you saw, just typical Denver Broncos offense. They won the football game, which is great, but kicking 6 field goals and not getting in the end zone, you need your running back to have a legitimate chance at getting into the end zone. I don't know if that's going to be the case. And again, Phillip Lindsay's 5,300, Melvin Gordon's 5,500. I might even look towards Phillip Lindsay if you wanted to pay for a Denver running back in this situation. But again, weather conditions coming in, a team that doesn't score that much, doesn't look like the greatest. Latavius Murray, New Orleans Saints, going up against that rushing defense for Carolina. You're not factoring on high usage numbers saying, give me 15 carries for 98 yards. But what are we looking for here, Kyle? Give me a red zone carry or two inside the 5 yards to try to punch it in. He's only 4,800. And if we slide it down even further, we'll see what we get out of Adrian Peterson. But sort of I don't want to say the torch is being passed over, but he's not going to be the bell cow back. But you're only paying about 4,600 for him. Sliding it even down further, when you're trying to take a look at some of those lottery ticket plays, Joe Mixon has not played this week, practiced this week for the Cincinnati Bengals. Even if he does give it a go, what's one of the worst injuries you can have as a running back? That's having a bad foot. So if you have a bad wheel, cutting and jumping, and you're playing on turf in Cincinnati, that doesn't check out really well for me. So Giovanni Bernard, just by default, might be able to get an extra 5 to 6 touches in this game that he usually doesn't get. And then if you take a look at the Jets again, Frank Gore, P. Ryan, you're just hit or miss here. There's not really much explosiveness between those two, specifically with this offense. But I got to tell you, the one guy that sticks out, if it's really low, and again, if you're paying up for a wide receiver, you're paying up for a quarterback, and you say, out of all these guys under 6,000, do you know who's an interesting look here? Going up against a really good defense. That's the fullback for the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Juszczyk. If you take a look at his usage, where they're going to take away George Kittle. They're going to take away Deebo Samuel. This is a guy that Kyle Shanahan should be able to use against these linebackers to pick up numbers. Say, Donnie, you're going after a fullback. If you've watched the games this year, he would have been a fantasy stud against the Eagles if a simple completed pass pass, he probably would have scored from 75 yards out.
Yep.
The same thing happened last week with the Rams. They are scheming specific plays for Juszczyk, and the good part about that is now that you have Raheem Mostert out, you get inside the 5-yard line, he's valuable. He can either catch a pass out of the backfield, run the football, or as I said again, fullbacks get lost in the wash. He's due for a 50-yard play. And when you take a look at a guy at $4,000, if I can get 4 catches for 60 yards and a rushing touchdown from 3 yards out, paid for itself right off the bat, Kyle.
I love hearing my boy Kyle Juszczyk brought up in the videos. It's very rare that he gets in here, but I do think you're right. It's a super contrarian play. And again, we're trying to win $1 million against 175,000 people. So sometimes those plays, look, I'm not saying jam them in 100 lineups, but I do think it's interesting in making some multiple lineups take a shot. Those are the kind of guys that win people $1 million. For me, under here, 6K, I do like David Johnson quite a bit at 5,300.
Yes,
The Packers are terrible against the run. They're 31st in the league against opposing running backs right now. We haven't seen these huge explosive games out of David Johnson, but he's playing 80% of the snaps. He's getting into double digits. He's getting nearly 20 carries in a game. I mean, we got a high total in this game. 57 it's sitting at right now? That's a lot of points in the Dome in Houston against a bad Green Bay defense. I think David Johnson's an interesting value this week at 5,300. Going down just a little bit here. Antonio Gibson against Dallas. Now, listen, again, it's not these huge games, but we have 5 straight weeks in double digits. The Cowboys are 25th against opposing running backs. He's 5,000 on DraftKings. He's been targeted 5 times each of the last 3 weeks, so he's involved in the passing game. I do have some interest in Antonio Gibson when looking for some value. Another guy, we just saw him have his best game of the season against the Dallas Cowboys. That's Kenyon Drake. He's sitting here at 4,800 on DraftKings. It's too low for me for a starting running back. Even finally got targeted a couple of times in that game. Look, if you have a guy who's going to be on the field for 2/3 of the snaps, you're not really getting that for anyone else down here in this price range. Opportunity equals points. Seattle's been pretty decent against opposing running backs this year. If you look at the game last year, where Kenyon Drake, after the trade from Miami to Arizona against Seattle, he put up 36 DraftKings points in that game last year against the Seattle Seahawks. So I think Kenyon Drake is an interesting play there at 4,800. And just some sort of punt plays. We mentioned Antonio Gibson. On DraftKings, it's a full point per reception. A guy like J.D. McKissic's playing like half the snaps, 50% right on the nose, actually. He's been targeted 22 times over the last 3 weeks, 3 straight double-digit fantasy outputs, 4,600 in a full point PPR sort of setting. I can get down with that. And you mentioned Giovanni Bernard. If Joe Mixon's not going to be there, is going to be limited. Giovanni Bernard, you can pretty much sign him up for 5 to 10 targets. That's what they're going to use him for. He still carried the ball 8 times last week, actually put up 12 points. So I could get there as well. The call of the day, Kyle Juszczyk. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it.
Like a little Trey Burton from last week right there. You know,
That's
that
right.
little sneaky unheralded guy. Here he goes, puts
That's
up 20
right.
points, and he got it made. Yeah,
That is right. I'm going to be so excited when he scores a touchdown, too. That's going to be a lot of fun in the Twitter sphere. Shifting over to wide receivers here. At the top, we do have a couple little injury things going on. What do you like above 6K this week at wide receiver?
This is interesting because usually you have that top 10 wide receivers and it really drops off. But the way you look at it this week, and it's great for DFS players that are looking to maybe cash in on that lucky lottery ticket, there's so many guys injured at the top of the heap that you might win by default by just avoiding them. If we're taking a look at DeAndre Hopkins, yes, going up against a defense, he should be able to torch, but he's got that bulky ankle. Are we paying $8,200 for a guy that might be more of a decoy than substance in that football game? I'm not going to do that. We know everybody's going to be on Devontae Adams going up against that Houston defense. Oh, bounce back here for Aaron Rodgers. We'll see if Bakhtiari gets back at left tackle to give him even more time to throw. And then you take a look, obviously, Michael Thomas. I don't know who's going to pay $7,600 for a guy that probably is not going to play in the game or wait it out. I doubt that's even a call. Calvin Ridley, same thing, banged up. DK Metcalf going against Arizona. You know he's going to be highly watched because he's coming off the bye week. He's going against Arizona. Arizona pushes the tempo. Just by default, his usage rate should be up there. The same thing with Julio Jones. Fooled us last week. Nobody's going near Julio Jones. And then it looks like he's back to a fresh rookie and healthy self, busting 2 touchdowns and going well over 100 yards. You put your money on Julio. Hey, he did the same thing last week. And then he dips out in the first quarter, and you spent $7,100 here on DraftKings on him, and you're not going to get very much production. Now you dip down to the guys that, you want to probably pay up for, and that's the Stephon Diggs going up against the New York Jets. Everybody beats the New York Jets. He should be able to eat in that football game. But are you paying $6,900 for Amari Cooper? with a bad offensive line, going against a decent defense on the road and a lot of other targets that are going to be able to spread it around. I'm not necessarily doing that. The one guy I would agree to pay up for, and again, is for Houston. You take a look at William Fuller. He can get deep or Will Fuller. He can get deep in this game, but also you're trying to factor it on saying Green Bay is going to push the tempo. Therefore, this offense without Bill O'Brien is humming. Just by default, he's probably going to have a big day. Kenny Golladay, another one here. Tyler Lockett is going to steal. That's the debate you want to have. Who you rather take? Pay up for DK Metcalf or pay down for Tyler Lockett that we've seen have 2-3 touchdown days already this year. CeeDee Lamb for Dallas, that same equation that we're talking about. There's too many footballs to go around, not a good enough offensive line, and you do know, you brought it up already. Zeke Elliott, a little bit of embarrassed. You know what a good coaching staff does? Even though I know you don't like Mike McCarthy, you say, hey, Zeke, you're our guy. We're riding with you this week. The fumbles, don't worry about it. You won't do it again. Yeah. And he gets 20 touches, but then again, that takes away from your wide receiver position. Chris Godwin banged up. Mike Evans is banged up. A.J. Brown might not play. Keenan Allen is banged up. All these guys lumped together around $6,200, $6,300, $6,400. And then the one guy that's always that steady hand, a little bit lower in a dome playing, that can hit that 72-yarder off, $6,000. I'm paying for Robbie Anderson. Good price for him.
Oh, yeah. I like Robbie Anderson quite a bit. I've liked him every week, and he has not disappointed. I don't think he's gone anywhere in single digits. We got that 30-point upside. I like him quite a bit. When you mention the guys up top, I think you're right. Anything over $7K that I'm paying for is probably Devontae Adams. I think Michael Thomas, did they rule him out, or did they say now he has a chance?
Yeah, if he has a hamstring injury and can't practice midweek, if he plays, is he standing around?
That's what I thought they ruled him out, but then they changed their mind and said doubtful, or it's something weird with that. I'm avoiding Michael Thomas, but Adams, if you have the salary to go to Devontae Adams, of course he's going to be targeted 10 or more times against the Houston team that struggles against the pass. He's going to see that Bradley Roby shadow coverage, he is their best secondary player, but he's not a great shutdown corner, still allowing something like 0.35 fantasy points per route ran against. And then you mentioned the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett scenario, and for me, it's Tyler Lockett. Now, I know Metcalf has been more consistent. Tyler Lockett's had these huge games, and then he's had these, the past 2 weeks, these very low games, targeted 4 and 5 times respectfully. DK Metcalf will most likely see a ton of Patrick Peterson on the outside. When you look at where DK Metcalf lines up, he lines up on the perimeter on 84% of his offensive snaps. So Patrick Peterson's going to be shadowing him. Patrick Peterson's still a very good corner. Doesn't mean Metcalf can't beat him for a play or two. DK Metcalf's very good. But then you drop 600 down and you get Tyler Lockett in the slot against Byron Murphy, who has been targeted on 20% of his defensive routes. We've seen him make a lot of mistakes this year. I think Tyler Lockett has the better matchup and the salary savings, so I like Tyler Lockett quite a bit in that matchup. You mentioned Stephon Diggs, and I like Stephon Diggs a lot. I get what you're really hoping for, especially if it's not Sam Darnold, although it looks like it could be practice on a limited basis. But if the Jets aren't participating in this game and they don't have to throw the football in the second half, you're going to want those 2 touchdowns in the first half. You want like 6 for 82 and 2 touchdowns in the first half, because you may not get shit in the second half if they don't have to throw the football a lot. So it is something to watch out for. I like Will Fuller quite a bit against Green Bay. Now, he'll probably see quite a bit of Jair Alexander, who is the best secondary player for the Green Bay Packers, but he's not a shadow guy. So he could see Kevin King on the other side as well. Will Fuller's been very, very good. He's staying healthy, which is nice to see. 2 of his last 3 weeks, at least a 26 and a 27. Sandwiched in there as a 16 is his low game. Nice high floor and a huge ceiling in a game where we expect a lot of points. Kenny Golladay might be my favorite receiver this week at $6,700 on DraftKings. The Falcons secondary is absolutely abysmal. He's going to see that Kendall Sheffield, Isaiah Oliver, AJ Terrell, all of whom are absolute dumpster fires. I know the kid Terrell's starting to come around a little bit, and he's a rookie, so I don't want to be too hard on him. But you got a banged-up Marvin Jones as well. Kenny Golladay should feast against a Falcons team that's allowing the 4th most fantasy points. 2 opposing wide receivers. I think Chris Godwin is going to be fine to play. They're just limiting his practice. He was targeted 7 times last week. 6,400, I could take a tournament shot on that against a Raiders defense that isn't very good. Now, this is another one with all those injuries on the offensive line. Vegas fights hard. There's no doubt about it. John Gruden teams aren't going to quit. But are they doing enough to really force Brady and company to put their foot on the gas and throw the ball more than they need to, especially when they're so vulnerable against the run? So it is a little bit iffy. If Keenan Allen plays, has been battling these back spasms, I'm a little concerned about this because he leaves the game early. They have the bye week. and he's still struggling with the back spasms. Feels like that Larry Bird syndrome for you older guys, where he's laying on the sideline getting or the Steve Nash maybe.
Steve Nash, yeah.
There you go. That might be a little more in the. But Keenan Allen, if he's healthy, I absolutely love the matchup, and he is the number one guy in the passing game. I mean, we saw before he got hurt those previous two games, 31 targets in 2 games. Just got to see if that back spasms always make me nervous, because it could be one play and done in that game. A little bit of interest in Odell Beckham against Cincinnati. Put up a 17 in week 2. Seems like he's, besides that game last week, which I don't think is a good representation of what Cleveland is. I just think they were all banged up, and Pittsburgh is on an absolute roll. They were in Pittsburgh. Just a tough game all around. I can definitely see Cleveland's offense bouncing back this week. So I do like Odell Beckham in the slot and on the perimeter this week against the Bengals. And then we mentioned Robbie Anderson there at 6K. Now, below 6K, I mean, there's a ton of wide receivers down here. This is where we make our money, right? Under 6K at wide receiver. What are you looking at this week?
Yeah, 6,000 to 5,000 here. It's loaded up, and this is where you're going to win your DFS league this week. This is where you may be able to cash in that difference between getting a $30 ticket and a $330 ticket here on DraftKings. But real quick on that Odell Beckham Jr., you bring up a pretty good point. We've seen the squeaky wheel work really well with him. I'm not happy. I want to win. All I want to do is win. Hey, look at this. 3 play action passes deep to him in the first quarter going against a bad defense. So that's something to keep an eye out. But getting below 6,000, usually would look at Jamison Crowder because the Jets think he's the only good wide receiver, so he gets 10 targets. But keep in mind, he's dealing with a groin injury. Practice Wednesday, but downgraded to out on Thursday. We'll see if he gets into practice today on Friday, because if he's healthy and gets matched up with Sam Darnold coming back in this game and maybe Mekhi Becton at left tackle, they're going to get beat. Trust me. They're double-digit underdogs in this game. But if he was healthy, he would be a volume guy, probably looking at about 10 targets in this game, but certainly a downgrade there. If you're banged up, you can't spend money on guys that might not be there in the second half of games. I'll tell you one I really like, Terry McLaurin, going up against that weak Dallas defense just by default. He has a chance to hit a big play against that defense. Kyle Allen is very mobile, can get away from the pass rush, and certainly has a viable enough arm to reach him downfield. Then you take a look at 5,700, Chase Claypool going up against Tennessee. Even when the offense isn't humming, he's still getting 4 catches for 75 yards and a great focal point of that offense. And then you take a look at DJ Moore. Look at all the targets he got. I believe he got double-digit targets last week alone going up against New Orleans, who they are a touchdown underdog. So theoretically, they will be losing in the fourth quarter. You might get those extra targets in that game as well. DJ Chark, which I normally would like in this game just by default because he's going to get his deep shots. But again, still banged up and injured. Juju Smith-Schuster at 5,500. You wouldn't have thought you would have saw that as much as, a year and a half ago. But there's so many options on that football team to eat. He just seems to be getting lost in the watch. And it's kind of interesting when you look, because he should be the guy that's the 1A guy getting the most of the targets. But now it's being spread around a lot. And it looks like Chase Claypool is now coming into his own, as he should be, with a high draft pick. Tyler Boyd going up against for Cincinnati, as well as T. Higgins, 5,400, 5,300. Why is that? If Joe Mixon is down in this game, that's a 50-pass game overall for Joe Burrow. So everybody's going to get spread around. Everybody's going to get a bump. And if you think they're down in the fourth quarter, like they were the first time against the Cleveland Browns, you probably figure on getting a couple extra targets. And my guy who's out of the witness protection program and a cheap price, even though he's going up against a decent defense in Green Bay, Brandon Cooks, again, just by default. This offense put up back-to-back weeks of 30 points without Bill O'Brien. He should be good again to possibly score and certainly get, that 7 to 8 targets that he deserves in that offense. Emmanuel Sanders, as we take a look at maybe on the opposite end, but I guess he really needs that 1A wide receiver to try to step up and be a comparable 2, because when he turns into the 1, very, very unreliable. So as we slide it down, maybe a cheaper option. Deebo Samuel, the great part about him is if the passing game isn't clicking, he can pick up 4 or 5 rushes on a reverse and pick up that extra 3 to 4 points. But those are the looks here that I have at 5,000. But that bunch between 6,000 and 5,000, that's going to win you your league this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like I like Terry McLaurin quite a bit. I mean, you get this Jordan Lewis and Tavon Diggs coverage giving a 0.49 and 0.70. I mean, if anyone in the slot, they're wide open. Dallas is absolutely dreadful. We saw what Christian Kirk did last week. Came close to a big, giant plus 32,000 bet on that. Damn it, I shouldn't have jinxed that bet. Oh, it was close.
Nice text to me, by the way.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done it, and I know it, but I need to break that. One of these days, I'm going to send the text, and it's going to win. Anyways, I actually had a over 100-yard 2-touchdown bet with Golden Tate last night that came close, too. That was plus 8,000. So I've been getting close on those long shots. I'm going to hit one of these days. I'm glad you brought up Juju Smith-Schuster. Been battling a knee issue all year long. Obviously has not had the type of fantasy season that we all expect. This week, he sees Christian Fulton in the slot. He's probably the second worst fantasy corner in terms of fantasy points allowed in the slot, allowing 0.63 fantasy points per route ran against. Smith-Schuster spends 82% of his routes in the slot. I do think he's under the radar. He's going to be low owned, and he's got big time upside. If he gets rolling in this game at 5,500, kind of going overlooked, I think I'm on board with that. I like to take players when everyone's down on them and no one wants to play them and they've got all this upside, and then boom, they go off. Tennessee allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That entire secondary for Tennessee has actually been torched this year. So I think Smith-Schuster is an under-the-radar tournament-type play. I like all 3 Bengals wide receivers, as a matter of fact. And if you go down, A.J. Green is starting to see his targets go up. 11 targets last week. He's at 4,300. So if you're looking for a guy, hey, I need a salary saver, T. Higgins looks to be like the new guy and new kid in town. Burrow loves getting the ball to Higgins. 23 targets over the last 3 weeks. Double-digit fantasy points each of the last 4 weeks. But A.J. Green at 4,300 could be a nice salary saver. I do like Brandon Cooks in that Houston-Green Bay game as well. Just going down, Christian Kirk, we mentioned. DeAndre Hopkins, banged up a little bit. Well, Christian Kirk, we've seen the big play upside. He's been back for 3 weeks, 11, 13, and then 23 on Monday night on only 2 catches. He's sitting there at 4,900 against a Seattle team that still looks to be without Jamal Adams in the secondary, which is huge. They're allowing the most fantasy points in the league to opposing wide receivers. I think you can do a whole lot worse under 5K than a Christian Kirk at 4,900 in a game that should have a nice tempo, so I do like him quite a bit. A guy like Mike Williams for the Chargers. We saw him sort of bounce back. 8 targets, got in the end zone twice, put up 31 DraftKings points. He's finally healthy, and then you've got a banged-up Keenan Allen on the other side. Jacksonville can't stop anyone, so if you're looking for some red zone upside, a guy like Mike Williams at 4,700 might be pretty interesting. Normally, I would jump all over this Jarvis Landry price here at 4,600, but now we find out he's battling a broken rib, and how many snaps will he play? Still been playing 72% of the snaps. I suppose you could throw a dart and take it, especially on DraftKings where it's a full point per reception at 4,600. It's something I would consider. And then going further down, that's about it. A.J. Green, I like at 4,300 quite a bit. Brashad Perriman for the Jets, I do think is interesting. If Sam Darnold's back, he was targeted 8 times last week in his return, put up 10 points in a scoreless game. Now, he might see a lot of Tre'Davious White, which will make you nervous if you kind of look where Perriman lines up. He's on the perimeter 74% of the time, so he's going to see Tre'Davious White, which makes it tough. But just from value alone at home in a game where they should be behind, I think you could do a lot worse than Brashad Perriman at 3,700, and I think that's about it. You've got these Jeff Smiths at minimum salary and Damiere Byrd, but you're really reaching there. I think you can find enough value there in that 43 to 5,000 range where you don't need to get too crazy there at wide receiver. Always a lot to go over at wide receiver. It's my favorite part of all of it, but I think those are all the numbers there. So let's take it over to the tight end position. The bane of my existence in DFS is the damn tight end position. What are you looking at? We'll just go through the whole tight end thing, all the tight ends you're looking at this week.
Yeah, why not? And by the way, since we do this tape delay here, we did get some good information coming out now. Talking about Zach Martin, the best offensive lineman left on the Dallas Cowboys. Kyle, he will be out for this weekend, not making the trip. So that's all 5 offensive linemen down. So you figure that easy Zeke Elliott game, we saw it week 1 with my Philadelphia Eagles. Get a banged up offensive line against that front 4. It doesn't really work out well for a quarterback that's not all that mobile for Dalton. And also, it looks like with the line dropping here with the New York Jets from about 12.5 down to 11, Sam Darnold is getting the start on Sunday, so you get a little bit of a bump if you're looking at some of those wide receivers for the New York Jets. Let's talk some tight end action here. Look, Kittle, 6,500. It is what it is. He's the best tight end on the slate each and every week. You're going to have to pay up. He's one of the few guys that can give you 8 catches and 135 yards and a touchdown in their offense. He is going to be the focal point, but the only problem with that is the one thing Bill Belichick has done better than any coach I've ever seen in my life is say, you know what? We know you want to go to George Kittle over the middle. I'm going to take that away. Beat us somewhere else. That's the only problem, because usually you can say my tight end is so good, it doesn't matter what you guys do, but that secondary is legitimate bracket coverage, and we've seen it time and time again. When you're taking a look at the San Francisco 49ers and what they want to do, you're looking at New England from that perspective with their secondary. They can line up and certainly go one-on-one and put their best, Stephon Gilmore on Kittle over the middle. Now, when we take a look at Kelsey as a tight end, we talked about also the issues with the weather conditions out in Denver. When you're looking at that and saying, well, hey, I want a lot of opportunities, the tight end position is the guy they're going to be dropping the football down to, but also you're taking a look at maybe they're going to focus in and take it away, and also the bounce that you get from the opposite side with the Denver Broncos, maybe slowing it down. It can't be that explosive in some windy weather conditions. Waller on Sunday afternoon, as opposed to Sunday night. When you take a look at him in the tight end position, he's a dominant player. He should get a lot of balls. But again, you're looking at the Dallas Cowboys situation saying, all right, if the offensive line is banged up, COVID, or not even there, can you trust anybody overall in that passing game? Those are the things that struggle. But who I think is going to have a decent bounce back week? Jonnu Smith, who hurt his ankle last week in the game versus the Houston Texans, he's now going to be involved in this passing game, because why? He's healthy and ready to go. You also have a key injury down in that in the linebacker position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The ball has to go somewhere. So if they're stopping the running game, I look for Jonnu Smith to get an upgrade, and also Tanyan for Green Bay. Tunyon, however you want to pronounce his name now, 4,600 is not a bad option just by default. I see the one guy here, Rob Gronkowski. And he's more of a focal point, but it's just pretty apparent. He's not the same Gronkowski from 3 or 4 years ago when he retired. More of that creaky, my back hurts, my ankles hurt, my arms hurt, and I'm running like a robot down the field. I don't have much hope in him, but maybe a Hayden Hurst as you're taking a look for the Atlanta Falcons, 4,400. Jared Cook in that game coming back healthy for the New Orleans Saints. Those are some of the guys farther down the list. And even, look, when your offensive line is bad, the ball has to come out quick. This guy gets brought up each and every week, and it's Dalton Schultz for the Dallas Cowboys. You're sitting here looking at a guy 3,900 going up against a defense that gives up a lot of points to tight ends. That's a guy I'm zeroing in on, and I will be willing to drop below 4,000 and reach for that tight end there.
Yeah, I love the Dalton Schultz call, and Washington allows the third most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, so I'm certainly on board with that. You're right about Kittle and Kelsey. You worry about that. Now, Travis Kelsey, you kind of look at that and go, okay, if it's a snow game and it's hard for him to get the ball to the perimeter, these little dump-off passes over the middle, jump passes that Mahomes does, everything he does to Kelsey.
Yep.
Travis Kelsey could be really interesting at 6,300. It's just hard to pay up at tight end, when you look at the other positions, because there's not a ton of value at running back, etc. I do like TJ Hawkinson against Atlanta again. Now, he doesn't have these huge games, but he's sitting there at 5,000. Atlanta allows the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. They're in the dome. Marvin Jones has been banged up. So then you go Galladay, TJ Hawkinson. I think he's an interesting play against Atlanta there at 5,000. Looks like Noah Fant is going to be back for Denver this week as well. Jonnu Smith, you mentioned the ankle injury. Would he play? Would he not play? Now it looks like he's going to play, which means that Anthony Firkser 3,000 value is gone that I loved earlier in the week. Probably my favorite tight end this week right here at 4,500 is Hunter Henry against Jacksonville. He's a major part of that passing game. He plays 87% of the offensive snaps, which is a ton for the tight end position. And you've got, Keenan Allen with the bad back struggling there. Obviously, no Austin Eckler, etc. So Hunter Henry against a Jacksonville team that's 28th against opposing tight ends at 4,500, I think is a really good play this week. I like Hunter Henry quite a bit. I do like Hayden Hurst. I will say Detroit has been good against tight ends. It's probably because teams can just throw to the wideouts all day long on that defense. They are third in the league right now, but Hayden Hurst at 4,400, you could do a lot worse than a tight end there. I think he's got some touchdown upside as well. 16 targets over the last 3 weeks. I could go there. Jared Cook at 4,300. You mentioned him. I do like that. And then a couple other guys here in the 4K range. I don't mind Austin Hooper. I know David Njoku's back, but Austin Hooper still playing 82% of the snaps, 23 targets over the last 3 weeks, double-digit fantasy points in 3 straight weeks, sitting there at 4,000 against a Bengals team who not just this year, but historically is very, very bad against opposing tight ends. So I do like Austin Hooper quite a bit at 4K. Of course, the Dalton Schultz call at 3,900 is another play I like as well. If for some reason Jonnu Smith gets downgraded to out or questionable over the weekend, then Anthony Firkser, we saw what he could do last week with Ryan Tannehill. But other than that, there's nothing else down here that I'm really looking at the tight end position. I don't see that 3,100 magical Trey Burton play this week. Last week it went well. Sometimes you look smart. I always tell people a broken clock is right twice a day. You know what I mean? And sometimes you hit them and then you look like a genius and everyone loves you. And this week they'll probably hate me again. So there we go. That's how that fucking goes, you know?
Yeah.
Closing out the show here, a few defenses you like. There's never a ton here. What are you looking at for defenses this week?
Yeah, and again, just with the news that's coming out now, you were really circling your wagons. 4,700 is extremely expensive to play for me for a defense. But if you were looking at Joe Flacco starting for that Jets game, 4,700 was an absolute steal and a bargain. Now that Darnold's back at quarterback, that means the Jets probably are not going to get shut out. So that 4,700 that I really wanted to pay up for. And again, this isn't the Bills defense that we've seen over the past 3 to 4 years. It's a leaky defense. Now you have an athletic quarterback coming back and be able to make some plays, put up some points. Again, if Flacco came, it didn't matter who the defense is. You're probably looking at a maximum out of the Jets, 10 points, if that, even though you saw them get shut out last week. I'm not paying up for that. The Chiefs are an interesting one because we know the Denver Broncos aren't that explosive. Now you're going to throw in some wintry weather conditions where you may be looking towards a lower scoring game. That's not a bad option at 4,300. The Patriots, just by default, again, we're not looking at a over-under in the 50s, more likely at that 43, 44 range, just by default, keeping the score down. The Buccaneers is a very interesting one because a full-go Oakland Raiders team will score points on just about anybody. But if we're looking at it, one of those where you say, hey, I can still make up my mind on Sunday morning, and they say, hey, they haven't cleared protocol here. We're going to be down 4 out of our 5 offensive linemen. That's a great one because they will pressure the heck out of Derek Carr. And if we know one thing, if you put pressure on Derek Carr, he's going to fumble and he's going to throw interceptions. The Steelers, 3,500, you're looking at a couple sacks in that game, but they're good. The Titans are going to score points, so I don't know if it's one of those defenses that I'm really targeting or trying to pay up for. The San Francisco 49ers, same thing. We saw how bad Cam Newton was last week, but it's not this isn't the 49ers defense of last year. You say, oh my gosh, watch this pass rush, these athletic linebackers in a dominant secondary get after Cam Newton and hold them to 10 points. I don't know if they're at that range, but taking sort of some of those deep shots down, I'm going to go right down the list. $2,500. That Washington football game, the same thing we talked about last week where it wasn't a bad option taking the Giants and or the Washington Redskins, and you ended up with a decent day, and the Giants even scored a touchdown because you don't have a lot of explosive plays. You can really manhandle those offensive lines, and for $2,500, a really good front four going against a team that has nobody up front, that's a great price to me, Kyle.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. They're the lowest marked defense that I have right here, the football team as it's marked here against Dallas. I really wish this was primetime. We can have Washington against primetime Dalton, but you're right. No offensive lineman, a non-mobile quarterback in Dalton. I think there's a lot of upside there, and they can certainly get after the quarterback. I do like the Chiefs in that bad weather game against the Broncos. I think that's a lower scoring game than especially than it was expected earlier in the week. Now we're seeing that total go down, the 46 and a half. I think they can do something against a bad Broncos offense. I love the Buccaneers at 3,700 against the Raiders, and you mentioned it. The Buccaneers, second most sacks in the league at 22. Well, now that might be different now that Philadelphia passed them last night, but once they play again here, they've been getting after the quarterback, good secondary, no offensive linemen for the Raiders, have practiced all week, so we'll have to see who's available there, but I think Tampa Bay is a nice option there on Sunday afternoon. I don't mind the Chargers at 3,400 either. I know they've kind of been lit up the last couple of weeks defensively, but Jacksonville, even though they try, they're going to throw the ball. They're not getting it done. Now you got an LA team that's rested. I actually like the Chargers quite a bit at 3,400. Melvin Ingram coming back this week should really help them get after Minshew. He and Bosa, I could see some strip sack fumbles and some mistakes by Minshew, some pick six upside there. I have a little bit of interest in the Saints at home. A few fans there with Lattimore and Jenkins back. Even though I like the Carolina offense, it only takes one pick six, one big play, put some pressure on Bridgewater. We sort of saw that last week in that game against the Bears where he can make some bad decisions when he's pressured. So I do think the Saints are a little bit interesting. And then one other defense besides Washington that I have is I do have the Cleveland Browns marked here at 2,800. Now, they haven't been great. And we saw in week 2 the Bengals were able to put up, 30 points. It was that 35-30 ball game. But then you get Myles Garrett going after a rookie quarterback. All it takes is one sack, strip fumble. Yep. Secondary is getting a little healthier. So I think the Browns are a defense you could consider at 2,800 as well. Well, that's it. Anything else we need to add on here before we get the hell out of here?
I don't think so, man. I think we covered it well. Got an extra day early so those people can get out there and really manage their lineups and not wait around for great content like Kyle puts out here.
Yeah, that's right. And Donnie, thanks for coming in, man.
Yep.
Doubling the knowledge. Again, thank you to all of you for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, be part of our giveaway. Congratulations again to our winner, Awesome713. Don't forget to check out Donnie over at rightwager.com. And this Sunday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, come in the chat box for an hour, ask your fantasy questions, ask your betting questions. We're going to cover every game top to bottom, give out our best picks, plays, predictions, right there at sportsbookreview.com. The link to that channel is in my video description below, so be sure to check all that out. Thank you all again so much. Good luck this weekend. May the fantasy gods be with you all, and we'll see you Sunday over there at Sportsbook Review. Goodbye, folks.